These are some of my favorite videos because I like to look into comparisons. Today we're going to be looking at the Samyang 85 f1.4 for the RF camera system, and we're going to compare it to the Canon RF 85mm f1.2 DS. We're going to be looking at the general characteristics of these lenses and how they photograph. As you can see behind me, I've purchased some specular lights, and that was for the purpose of testing out the bokeh, and they turned out really well. And we can see some actual differences between the bokeh and the 85-1.4 Samyang, the off-brand, the third party, the infamous, the iconic lens. I was luckily able to pick this up on the used market for $500 before Canon started blocking third-party lenses. The 85-1.2 from Canon is about 3,900 Canadian dollars. So we're looking at a massive price difference between these two lenses. So when you look at the comparison, you'll have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth that extra money to get a Canon lens, the premium, most perfect Canon portrait lens? Or, can this off-brand lens for a fraction of the cost do the job I need it to do? So I set up a little bit of a set. I have a backdrop, I had the specular lights, I had two LED lights at differing power outputs, and I also use a Stella Reflex Pro, which is a LED light, a very powerful LED light that also doubles as a flash. As a kind gesture, they actually gave me this dome that goes over the actual light, and it diffuses the light nicely like a softbox. I also use the reflection dish with the silver reflector, and I took a few test shots, got the ones that I wanted. We're gonna get into these images, but I was actually surprised to see that when looking at the LCD on the back of my camera, there were a few characteristic differences like the bokeh, but clarity, looking at the back of the camera, I wasn't able to see much of a difference. It wasn't until I got into Adobe Lightroom Classic and I zoomed in that the Canon 85, it actually stood out quite a bit. In clarity, it was leagues apart. The last time I compared the Canon line with the Samyang line was with the EF 85-1.2 Canon lens versus this Samyang 85-1.4 RF. So I use the adapter for the EF lens, but now we're using the RF Canon lens. And if I remember correctly, in that video, did quite well actually. The Canon EF lens and the Samyang RF lens were actually quite comparable. There were some characteristic differences, a little bit of fringing and chromatic aberration. There was a little bit of discrepancy in the sharpness, but it was a lot closer than what I found in this comparison. For me, in terms of quality of image, bokeh balls, color, the Canon RF 85-1.2 absolutely blew this out of the water. However, I say that with a grain of salt, because when you look at the cost difference, this is the clear winner. It really matters what you are using this for and if this is good enough to get the job done. Because I will say I got great portraits with this lens. Yeah, it's not as clear as the $4,000 lens, but for, like I said, a fraction of the cost, I was very surprised with this lens, and I highly recommend it. I'm gonna keep this lens. First of all, it's super light. This is only 582 grams, whereas the Canon RF 85-1.2 is 1,190 grams. So this is like half the weight of that thing. So in terms of carrying it around, you're gonna have a noticeable difference in weight. So that's a big plus for this guy. Another test that I ran was actually putting on this Cinebloom 20% diffuser. I thought I would try it out, and it's a pretty cool effect. It does look like it desaturates, decontrasts the image, but in this test in particular, you didn't really see the effect of the diffuser when it comes to lights, because at 1.4, it's really blowing out the lights already. But typically when you have this diffuser on, it will really make the lights nice and fuzzy. It will give a nice soft, hazy effect. So I thought it was pretty cool to try this out. Okay guys, we are in Lightroom Classic right now. On the right hand here, I have the Samyang 85 f1.4. It's the RF, and the settings are 1/125th of a second, f1.4, and ISO of 100. Zoom in here, colors look good. You're gonna see all of my blemishes. I'm ashamed. No, but colors look good. Sharpness honestly looks decent. It does look a little soft by the eyes, and I was using eye autofocus. But you're gonna check this out. I'm gonna put the Canon portrait right beside, and we're gonna look at the eyes. Check this out. Just a massive difference with clarity. I did have to go up to 160 just to adjust for similar exposure, but 1/25 f1.4, even though this lens can go down to f1.2 and 160. Look at the eyes. Just the Samyang looks so soft compared to the RF 85 1.2 shooting at 1.4. The next thing that's most noticeably different is going to be the bokeh. The bokeh on the 85 1.2 DS from Canon, flawless. Okay, when you look at the Samyang, obviously it's not as beautiful or fuzzy or as diffused as, say, the Canon. And this is the reason why you would get the DS, because look at the beautiful roundness, how appealing that is when stopped down at 1.4. Let's zoom into that bokeh. And we're keeping the same reference point. Very noticeable differences in the shapes of the bokeh. The DS again, and this is the Samyang. What you're looking at now is the Samyang 85 1.4. This is with no filter on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we have the Moment Cinebloom 20% diffusion filter. As you can see, it's a little bit more hazy, a little bit more dull, lacking a bit of contrast. But I thought I would, put them on the screen just so you can kind of get a closer look, a more dreamy effect on the 20% diffusion. The sharpness is obviously not going to change. We're using the same lens, but this looks definitely more dreamy. Though I thought there would be a bit more of a difference with what the filter does to the light, because typically, generally speaking, if you're shooting at a direct light, you see a lot more fuzziness in the light. And then finally, on the left-hand side, we have the Canon 85 RF 1.2 DS shooting at 1.2. Compared to the Samyang 85 1.4 shooting at 1.4, obviously, with the diffusion filter. So now you're looking at the non-filtered Samyang 85 1.4 and the non-filtered, obviously, Canon 85 1.2 shooting at 1.2. So on the left, we're shooting at 1.2. On the right, we're shooting at 1.4, which is the minimum for the Samyang. Again, this has no filter on there, but still, you can, it's so clear that the Canon is way sharper than the Samyang. So I'll say this in conclusion. In terms of weight, the Samyang beats the Canon, okay? In terms of price, the Samyang destroys the Canon, okay, for what you get. In terms of overall clarity and quality of the image, it's really no question to me. The Canon 85 RF 1.2 DS is just, it blows it out of the water. The bokeh is just so much more beautiful and appealing. The clarity of the image is just spot on. It's sharp. It is razor sharp. And like I said, when I compared it in Adobe Lightroom Classic, there was really no question. However, given the benefits of this lens, I would say this is a W. I would say if you can, definitely pick one of these guys up, especially if you don't need the 85 f1.2. This is a great lens to have in your kit. It's a great lens to have in your arsenal. I give it a big W. I don't know, in terms of quality control and customer care and all that stuff, I don't know. Obviously, I've only used this a few times. It's worked great for me. I've had no issues on my Canon products, like the Canon R3. It's fully updated with the most recent firmware. I've had no issues with this lens at all. One thing I will say about the Canon and the Samyang is that both are a little loud when it comes to focus. You do hear them, but that's not a big deal. I'm just being nitpicky here. If you guys like this kind of video, this kind of content, be sure to hit that like, subscribe, and comment down below, guys. If you want to check out my Instagram, it's @MillmanStudios, and my black and white Instagram page is Stark Contrast. Thank you so much for tuning into this comparison video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for the subscribers so far. We are almost at 1,300. You guys are the best. But at the end of the day, guys, don't forget to keep on shooting.